It doesn't even make sense why I think about you. It was only one night, only that time, and it's not my style to be caught up in the middle like this. Cause now I dream about you. I was probably too drunk, it's blurry, but I've got the image of you running circles in my mind right now. And it could fade away, but it probably won't. And I should let it be.
Hello again and welcome back to my studio. So as you can already tell by my intro, today I'm going to be sharing with you some beetle paintings. So it's the same image that I used and I painted it 6 times. I painted these 6 beetles in an attempt to understand gouache better. I primarily work with watercolor, and when I'm using gouache I tend to get a little confused and water it down a little bit too much. I'm going to be sharing my process out of order of how I painted them, because most people only watch the first few minutes of a video. I want to share where I was starting to get a hang of the gouache process, where I was starting to loosen up and develop a workflow and kind of understand more about the consistencies, the different consistencies of gouache, and when I was getting better at working from dark to light. I'm including all of them that I made, and the ones that I feel like went the best I've put at the beginning. If you want to see where I started at, you can keep watching. I have everything time-stamped and labeled so you'll know the order that I did them in. You can see an artist's learning process, which I think is super helpful to know, because we all start off at 0 and we have to learn skills. And it's too often that we think when we look at somebody making art that we love that they just boom, they just were born that way. And it's not true. It takes a lot of hard work, and some of us start off with a little bit more natural aptitude than others, but with some teaching, most of us can reach a high level if we want to. Interest is important. I'm interested in art. I'm interested in making stuff. So I work at it. But other people, it might not be their thing. No, they're not going to be artists. But it's not because they don't have talent. They won't know if they have talent until they try. Although I'm working hard to keep the edges wet of my wash doesn't turn out super great on any of these paintings. You can see it particularly on this one here. And it's because I was not using the right side of the paper. The paper in this sketchbook has sides. I was using it backwards without noticing. This is the correct side to use it, and the wash turns out much nicer. And this is the wrong side. I chose number 4 because it's my favorite, mostly because of the composition and how the colors turned out. I'd been experimenting with color and backgrounds with these, as well as with trying to understand gouache. And this painting is also where I started to get better at understanding using the tea to butter method of applying gouache, which basically means you start off with really thin paint and then use your thicker paint for the subsequent layers. Thick paint's more likely to reactivate than thin paint, and so you want your tea layer, the thin paint, to be on the bottom, and then you want your subsequent layers to get thicker and thicker, consistency of milk, then all the way to butter, when you're less likely to reactivate it because you're not putting anything on top of it. I had painted the beetle enough times at this point that I had a better understanding of the shape, and I feel like I was able to be loose, not just because I was more familiar with using gouache and I'd been painting a while. If it's been a while since you've painted or drawn something, you're going to be rusty. Well, at least most people are. I wasn't rusty at this point, and so I was able to be loose and relaxed and get into the flow much easier. At this point, I was more aware of the shape of the beetle. I had a more intuitive sense of how to curve the lines to make the shell look round and luminous and stand out from the page. To make the shell look round, I was doing a much better job of it at that point. Now, also, I'd already painted the bug 3 times, and so my hands were getting pretty tired. I mean, I did it over a couple of days, but still, here's something that I was doing. I was taking breaks, lots of breaks, of course, doing lots of different things, but something that I like to do when I've been painting for a while is exercise my hands in a different way. And so I'm using some Thera Putty here to do that.
Is saying, I don't know, because he doesn't go into detail about why he said that, but I think what I would assume he means by that is a lot of the emotional.
I was also watching, or mostly listening to, Psychology in Seattle's take on Love is Blind. Prior to watching Love is Blind, I hadn't watched a lot of reality TV. Although after it, I was like, it's bad, but it's not so bad. And I've actually watched Lizzo's Watch Out for the Big Girls, which I adored. Love is Blind was good. I liked the premise. I love the idea that you can really get to know someone and fall in love without actually seeing them. And spoiler alert, it seems to work some of the time, like a really small amount of the time, but like I would guess it has a higher success rate than any other dating app. My main complaint really with Love is Blind was the editing. I just feel like they cut it to be the most dramatic and maybe not as true to like the premise, the idea that love is blind, as possible. I feel like they could have edited it in a way that was more, true to what the people were actually experiencing. And then also, it's kind of a train wreck sometimes watching the couples, especially in season 1. No, yeah, I've watched both. I can't remember if season 2 was as bad. Oh yeah, it was just as bad. A lot of the couples, they're not communicating. And I just think, and that would be acceptable maybe 10, 20 years ago, because communication and self-advocacy and mental health were not as popular then, but times have changed, and I think that we could do better. A lot of the individuals would have benefited from counseling of some sort, and I didn't see it happening. I would say even in like Lizzo's girls, some of the girls really seem to be struggling, and although I feel like it's a really powerfully positive show, and I'm sure that they were getting tremendous support, and I think most of them would say that they came out much more aware. Even both shows, Love is Blind, Lizzo's Watch Out for the Big Girls, I'm sure that all of the individuals came out feeling like they knew so much more about themselves. But I also think that it could have been aided with some support, some emotional support. And then I would have liked the show even better. So back to my Beetle. Yeah, I don't have a lot more to say about this one because it just went really well, and I liked the colors, and I think that I got the amount of white that you would want to add to make something pop, to make it look 3D. I feel like I got the correct amount of white. It can be really easy to overdo it. And if you look at the reference image, the reference actually has lots and lots of little reflections. And because gouache is such a flat medium, I didn't find it worked that well to just overdo it with the white or even the yellow. And maybe I'll find a way to do it in the future, or maybe I'll use a different medium. Oil paint and Copic markers, I feel like are a little bit more luminous. And so acrylics too. I've just never used acrylics at all. Anyway, in reality, you should be able to use any medium to make something look luminous. You just have to make sure that you're putting the shadows in the right place. A lot of it's actually putting really dark next to really light. So on this wash, you can totally tell how much the sizing got pulled up from the back side of the paper and kind of made a mess, which would be really cool if that's what you wanted, if you were looking for that effect. But I was looking for a flat wash, and it did not happen on the back side of this paper. So I've put this bug second, even though it was the last one I did. Maybe I was getting tired, or, I mean, look how loose I am right there. Like, I mean, it turned out like really good as far as like looseness goes, and I like the colors I use, but I just didn't necessarily like how the composition turned out quite as much, and I didn't like the amount of, this is my heat lamp, by the way. I use it to dry the paintings and most of the year keep myself warm. So I didn't like the contrast in the number 6 painting as much as I did in the number 4 painting. I think the main difference was just how bright the overall image was. Right here it's bright. I haven't added on the darker layers, and the painting's gonna get quite a bit darker. And the background's, I mean, it's kind of a dark pink. In fact, in person, the background's even a little bit darker than how I've edited here, how the camera's picked it up. I also think that the corner there, the background by the Beetles mid, gosh, I'm so bad at my Beetle anatomy, but the center part of the body, you see like that big splotch. I think that it's really distracting in the final image. And I've been experimenting with doing different backgrounds and adding different effects by throwing alcohol on my watercolor paint or different things, but this is the only place there's like a big splash, and then on the side you can kind of see the lines of my brushwork. I'm still talking about the background. And you know, it's just I don't think it does much for it doesn't do much to bring attention to the subject. If you look in the palette in the top right corner, you'll see magenta, and I'm using 2 different magentas. One of them was an acrylic gouache, and I didn't realize it was acrylic gouache when I was using it because I got it in a Sketchbox 4 or 5 years ago, I don't know, and I hadn't used it because I mostly had been using my Holbein Gouache, so I haven't read the label, or at least I didn't read the label when I put it into the palette. I was able to use it on some of the original Beetles, but after a few days it hardened and I was not able to re-wet it, and I was like, what is wrong with this? So I put in some of the Holbein Gouache, looked at the original, I was like, oh, it's acrylic gouache, makes sense, okay. So that actually inspired me to go buy some other acrylic gouaches, because I still wasn't sure what the problem was with my backgrounds. I just thought, oh, maybe gouache is just like super hard to do a flat wash. I mean, I'm not that good at it in watercolor anyways, so maybe it's just even harder in gouache and I just don't know what I'm doing. So I purchased a few extra acrylic gouaches. I should say, like, I think I bought 2. One in a cyan color and one in a yellow color, so I can mix pretty much anything I want and create any background color I want. And now I have that in my toolkit to use anytime I want. I'm glad that I got it in my Sketchbox because it's not something I would have necessarily chosen off the shelf, but I'm really glad that I have it for experimentation. All right, so painting 5. So that would be my 3rd favorite. And I actually end up changing the background here because I already had a pink bug, or I already had a pink background. Sorry about the paper rustling noise. I'm looking at the sketchbook while I record this voiceover. Number 2 bug that you'll see later has a pink background. And I just wanted, I was testing it out. I was seeing which different backgrounds would look best. I would say this is the first painting that I was understanding the tea to butter principles a little bit more, and also loosening up quite a bit. The overall painting turned out quite dark. If I'd left it the pink, I think the contrast would have been better, which I would have preferred. But I did not. I opted to experiment more. And I should say that here on this channel, that's something that I really encourage. I know a lot of artists feel embarrassed to show work that's not their best, and I really don't want to do that. I really want to share my work that's good. I want to share my work that's crap. I mean, it hurts, it's hard, but like, we all make it, and I really love it when I see the work of different artists who I admire, and I see them having an off day or making something that they're just like, I don't like this at all. I like, this is assuming the person's not super negative and hates all their work or something. Personally, I like some of my work and some of it's not my favorite. I have kind of high ideals about what I would like to be creating. And so a lot of times I don't really see my work as good or bad. It's just kind of neutral. And I don't think that that's a bad place to be, because when I'm making something, a lot of times I'm making it for the sake of making it, for the sake of experiencing the medium, and not for the sake of the actual product that you get in the end. Sometimes I make a product that I really love, and sometimes I don't, but I almost always love working with the materials. I try not to put too much pressure on myself to always be creating something that I think other people will like. That's actually something that's really not that hard for me. I'm relatively decent at having no idea what other people like or want, or understanding it but accepting that I may not be able to achieve that, and that I'm going to have to do my own thing, even if it means other people will not admire it or like it. I think I'm lucky in that respect, that I can be somewhat oblivious to what other people are expecting. It's also a downside though, because sometimes I would really like to make work knowing that other people would like it, that it would sell, that it would do well on Instagram. Being mildly oblivious though does allow me to follow my own path, do my own thing, and be more in the moment with whatever I'm doing, and really enjoy the mediums and not worry too much about the product. I'm not frustrated usually if the thing I'm painting doesn't turn out how I imagined. Also because I don't really have pictures in my head that tell me what I want it to look like. Usually I'm more focused on, I would like the thing that I'm painting to be as accurate as possible, which is kind of bad if you're looking for something stylized. But it's good in that I am starting to understand light better, and I'll probably continue down that path. I would like to have my own style. Some people say that they feel like I have my own style. I don't see it. I feel like every time I'm painting, I'm like, okay, I want it to look exactly like what I'm trying to do so that I can learn the most about it. I would say, though, that I learned most about it in terms of like light. I would say, though, that has changed a bit in the last year. I've never been accurate in my sketchbook because I'm drawing it quickly and there's just only so many things that you can paint or draw in a short amount of time. So it's not like I succeed at absolute accuracy. Okay, so here's when I discovered like, yeah, this acrylic gouache is not going to work, and I'm going to add in some regular gouache so that I can use magenta. Speaking of stylized, the second and third bugs in particular, and the first one to a degree, I feel like are more stylized than the last few beetles that I painted. I can't remember if I was trying to stylize them. I don't think so, but I was also really just playing with the gouache. I was just really trying to understand like tea to butter and like the consistencies and how it works differently than watercolor, focusing on like, let's not water this down too much, because that's what I always do. So I can't remember if I wanted it to be stylized, but it did turn out stylized. And I think that some of that has to do with, I just rushed the sketch. I didn't try very hard to make a sketch that was accurate because I just wanted to get to painting. I may have taken more time with the sketches in the 4th, 5th, and 6th Beetles, or I may have just sketched it enough times that I had a better understanding of the shape and was just accidentally more accurate. I do a lot of different things to the background because I'm also experimenting with mixed media. So I've got my pencils out, and I don't like to use pencils all that often. The main reasons being that I used a lot of colored pencils in high school when that's all I could afford. And I know how to use them, and it's not a challenge, and I can do pretty much whatever I want to do with them. I would probably keep using them because it's always nice to have success, except that nowadays using them, like, I feel like my grip is too tight and I always end up my handle hurt or I get a little bit of a headache. I really like painting because you kind of have no choice but to be gentle with your touch, and so I don't get a headache quite as quickly unless I'm hunched over, which I usually am. I really think I need one of those doodads that you put on the back of your neck that reminds you to sit up straight. Unless I'm slouching, I feel like it's not too painful to paint. That's mostly why I don't use pencils as my main medium. The other reason being, oh my gosh, it takes so long. And I didn't mind that when I was in high school. I had time on my hands. I don't know. I didn't have kids. It did not bother me in the least to do like a super detailed, accurate drawing in colored pencil and have it take hours and hours. But since I've started painting, that just seems intolerable now. I can't stand it. So it's like I could cover this whole page in like 2 minutes. I also went to high school at a time where there was like no social media, no cell phones. So like I also may have just been using colored pencils in a less fast-paced time. And so enjoying the slow process wasn't as much of a problem for a brain that is now used to things happening quickly and when I want them to. And so, could be that. But I'm just not using colored pencils a tremendous amount, but I did use them in several of I used them mostly for bugs 2 and 3, and I mostly used them in the background to help even out the washes, although I would say the washes turned out the best on 2 and 3. They were like the most even for whatever reason, I'm not really sure. But I was also trying to give them a little bit of movement and life, and I would say I really like how bug number 2 turned out the best. I don't feel like I gave bug number 3 very much life. But I think that it has more life in it than the more realistic drawings, paintings that I made later. Although I'm really glad that I experimented with adding to the background with pencil, I think it looks better before I do that because it's higher contrast. You actually don't see it in this painting because I did it later and didn't film it. So here we are on bug number 2. This is the second time that I painted the beetle, and I would say it's quite stylized and a lot of fun compared to my more accurate paintings later. I'm really glad that I experimented with the pencils and messed around, even if the results weren't always pleasing. I really like that I did experiment, that I took the time to experiment and make mistakes and see what I like or didn't like. I don't know if I've mentioned, but this isn't my first time working with gouache. It's just my first time working with gouache since learning watercolor really well. And the first paint that I used after a brief stint with oil painting, which I had a 2-year-old at the time, and oil painting and 2-year-olds, even though I did buy the water-based non-toxic ones, 2-year-olds and oil painting in a house where you don't have a studio is not a good combination. So after oil painting, I was sewing clothes for a while. It seemed practical because I could wear them, and it seemed to mix well with the homeschooling I was doing at the time. And then it stopped being conducive at all. And so I went back to my first love, drawing, which you can do on the go, no matter where you're driving your children. And I had done oil painting, like I said, and then I discovered gouache. And gouache is similar to oil painting because you can do light to dark or dark to light. It doesn't matter. Whereas with watercolor, you need to do light to dark, and you have to think that way, which I still find not challenging. Like, I can think in that way, but preserving my whites I still find difficult, challenging, and sometimes impossible. So although I have worked with gouache before, because I've been using watercolor for so long, it's just a bit confusing. Of course, with watercolor, you can always take out the white gouache and add it just like I'm doing with this yellow later. But at the time, it kind of felt like cheating. I don't think there is any cheating in art anymore. I mean, logically, I know this, but it still just seems better to preserve your whites in the first place if you can. I think you get a better look overall if you can do that. The white of the papers may be whiter than the gouache. Okay, so I love what I did here, where I pulled out the lighter colors. Like, I did the background and then pulled out the lighter colors and then painted this darker background in this monochrome way. And I would love to do this again and then not cover it up. So this actually might be better done in watercolor and not as a gouache painting, because I just really liked how it looked. I even liked right here where I'm outlining it and haven't colored in yet. I think it'd be a really interesting I think it's a very interesting effect. So this is the first time I painted the beetle, and I don't remember how long I took on the sketch, if I was being super careful with it or if I was being kind of loose. I hadn't really intended to paint the beetle 5 more times after this. I just sat down and wanted to paint something. And I love painting beetles. They are one of my favorite subjects. And so I found a nice picture on Pexels, and I'll link it below. And then proceeded to paint it numerous times. So when I say nice image, there are lots of pictures of beetles. Not all of them are not copyrighted, but either way, there are lots of pictures of beetles, but there aren't necessarily pictures where they look round, where it would be easy to copy the image, to learn from the image how to make your subject look three-dimensional. So this image I in particular chose because of the way the light hits the shell and how it is obvious that it is round. So when I go to copy the image, copy is not the right word. When I use the reference image for my painting, I will be able to get some believable results because my reference image is good. And if I had a live subject that was willing to sit still for me, that would be even better because I could change the lighting up until I got the perfect view in order to make the painting look three-dimensional. I really like how the colors ended up turning out on this one. I can't say I really love the background though. I end up darkening it only on one side, which I'm still really happy that I experimented, but my experiments results were, they're okay. I really like the way beetles are painted in scientific illustrations. Usually it's a white background. Usually the illustrations are done with pencil on the paper that is plastic. I don't remember the name of the paper. I really like the way that looks, but I don't really enjoy using these mediums, and so I want to be able to create something with watercolor or gouache, two mediums that I really love using. I'd like to create something that's like a scientific illustration, but maybe more colorful, more animated, like the second two beetles that I painted. They're very animated, or well, more animated than this one or the last couple of ones that I did. So I'm going to keep experimenting and see what else I like, and maybe I should do a few more with white backgrounds because I haven't done that much. When I was in a show, I made a very big painting, and it was with a green background, just similar to this. And it was fine. It was different than everyone else's because I have not taken a scientific illustration program. So I was unaware of the norms until I saw the other work. Most of the other people in the show had done a science illustration course, and I hadn't, so I didn't realize any of the normal, ways things were done. I'm kind of glad I didn't, just because then I'm doing my own thing, I guess. And they liked it well enough. and they still let me in the show. So I'd like to develop a little bit more way of featuring insects for their awesomeness. Like, I just think they're so beautiful. And of course, the way it's done in the traditional illustration sense is gorgeous. There's lots of different ways to do it. I definitely want to develop my own way of doing it in the mediums that I like working in. So we are 36 minutes in. I do not know who is still listening. I really appreciate if you are still here with me. However, unless you just want to chat about Love is Blind with me or watch out for the big girls, I'm going to have to just leave you here. I'm sure I have more to say about the artwork that I've made, but I think I've said pretty much what I'd like to say, and keep watching if you are interested in how I complete this beetle. And I'm gonna put on some nice music for you. Well, I think it's nice. We may not share the same taste in music. So, you know, there's the mute button if you are not into what I have provided.
But it probably won't, and I should let it be. But I'm gonna dive into you. And maybe I'll drown. What can I do? And it would be alright to let me down. Rather we try than let these feelings slide. So I'm gonna dive into you.
It doesn't even make sense why we try to fight it. Every time that we touch, the room caught on fire. We could blame it on the wine, but we know that we will both be lying. I wish I didn't want you. I was doing just fine, the way that it was. Then you hand me these emotions, didn't want them, but I guess that I sucked with them. They could go away, but I know they won't, and I should let it be. But I'm gonna dive into you, and maybe I drown, but what can
Well, hello there. Hello. Hi. So you made it to the end. Wow. You made it to the end of this video. That is very flattering. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.